It's fantastic to see people here. I'm going to kick off the workshop. I hope that this will be interactive, okay, so that you'll ask questions, interrupt. We're here to give you a kind of a run-through of a number of aspects of the project and what we've produced, and also to hopefully create a network and connections among you so that you can take this forward in your own universities. Okay, so let me begin. I'll talk to begin with, and then Antonio's going to pick up with taking up how core teaches some of the difficult concepts differently from other textbooks. So the first thing is that all the teaching and learning materials are free. So this is the website. If you haven't been there already, then you should go there now. What you'll notice on the home page that you can access the ebooks directly from the home page, and you can also find the link there to the apps. So you can get an app for offline use for Windows, so on your laptop, on your phone. There's an EPUB version as well. So all of those are readily available from the home page. To access the teacher's resources, you need to register, which I mentioned yesterday. So is anyone registered? Excellent. Okay. If you've just tried to register yesterday, it'll probably take a couple of days before you get connected up. The fourth point there is that there's a lot of resources on the website. There's always the problem of the user experience and how to best direct people towards resources. So I'm just really emphasizing the fact that there's a lot there. So there are PowerPoint slides, there are additional exercises, there are games and experiments, there's a fact checker, so some, I don't know, 2,500 facts in the ebook have all been checked, and you can find the sources in the fact checker. There's an online quiz that students can test themselves on the glossary. So there's a lot of stuff there. As I mentioned yesterday, there are 3 virtual workshops already on the website. So there's one from Bristol, held at Bristol University last year, one at the University of Witwatersrand last December, so in South Africa, and then one in Warwick this past summer. They're very easily navigable, so again I encourage you to use those virtual workshops and to use them also to introduce colleagues to different aspects of the project. Okay, so I'll leave you to explore them. This is the news about the Spanish translation. We've got units 1 to 10 that should be online as an interactive ebook by the end of January, and then 11 to 22 by the end of August. So that's the current timetable, and we've always delivered these on time, so there's no reason to doubt that it'll be any different in this case. The Portuguese translation is underway, but getting it into the interactive ebook is being held up because there's problems with funding from the federal government. That the translation's being funded through IPEA, but we're hoping that will kind of unfreeze, and the Portuguese translation will also be up pretty soon. So this is the Unit 1 of the Spanish version. Unit 2. This is one of the questions with the feedback, one of the typical interactive MCQs. These are the things that, one of the things the students like best about learning from the ebook. They get immediate feedback, so this has great kind of pedagogical benefit. Some of them use it to test themselves, others use it the first time they go through as a learning device. So they click all the options and get the feedback. So whether the option is right or wrong, then they learn in response to that. This is one of the charts. So the hockey stick that I showed, yeah.
Just a question on the quizzes that you were mentioning, Wendy.
Yes.
So if, for instance, I adopt this with my class, then do I register my class? So for instance, for the quizzes, then I can get the grades from the
No, you can't get the grades. So the quizzes are for learning
just
by the
practice,
students.
Practice.
Yeah. It's so what we do not have is what the publishers produce, which is a kind of classroom assessment tool, which allows you, for example, to collect all the grades and feed them into your learning management system. So we have a project to create courseware of that kind. It's a project based at Barnard and Columbia, and that will be coming on stream in English within the next year. So people ask about the material that's free and so on. So the kind of motto is that knowledge is free but teaching isn't. So that when we get these courseware packages, there will be a fee associated with that, not as exorbitant as commercial publishers charge, but we have to also generate revenue to keep the project alive. Okay, so this is the Korea, the non-hockey stick performance of a set of countries. Here I'm really showing this to you to show you the links that we've now got to our world in data that Tim, yeah.
Excuse me, can some of the lights be turned off?
Yeah, if these lights are turned off, it's probably easier to see the screen. Hi, Raphael.
Hi.
Great that you're here. Okay, so Tim Besley in his talk yesterday produced some charts from our world in data. We now have this red button at the bottom of lots of charts in the ebooks where you can press the button and then you go to here, which is the same data in our world in data. So this is a fantastic tool for your students because you can see that what I've done, if you look up here, there's add a country. So you can add countries, take countries away, and we've now, I added, so we've got Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Brazil shown here. And you can do that on the fly in your classroom. The students who've got their phones or laptops can do it themselves. They can immediately download the data. So it's just sitting there on a tab. And the other great thing is that you can just press the button to go from linear to log scale. And just getting some of these kind of data visualization, data handling in front of the students very early on takes them a long way. Okay, so this is Raphael. This is the Unit 1 of the Portuguese version that's in process. Again, a second element of that. This was again using our world in data and adding here Portugal. I was in Lisbon giving a talk not so long ago, so I wanted to show the chart with Portugal in it. So this is just a very flexible tool that's now completely built into the ebooks. Right, so what are they, these ebooks? This is the economy, the first one, the big fat red one if you've seen the physical book. The one with 22 units. If we... how can I click this? Probably can't. Anyway, I'll go to that in a moment. The second one is the green one, Economy, Society and Public Policy. This is 12 units, it's much shorter. It's designed for students who are not, at least to begin with, deliberately specialising in economics, so for a broader social science undergraduate group. It's also being used a lot already in Masters of Public Policy, MPA type programs. So that's the green one, and then the third one is called Doing Economics, and this is a set of empirical projects that are one project per unit of ESPP, but you can also link the projects to the economy, and I'll show you a bit more about them.
What is ESPP?
So this one is ESPP, Economy, Society and Public Policy, just ESPP for short. So the two green ones are connected in that the topics in the Doing Economics match the order of the topics in here. The point about the Doing Economics is that they are practical data handling projects that are delivered in Excel and R, and in the 1.0 version that's just about to come out, they're also in Google Sheets. So step-by-step instructions for students to do projects who've got no prior knowledge of using R or spreadsheets. This is the Leibniz. Well, the point about this is that there is an option for using calculus. Some people teach some groups of introductory students using calculus, others don't. The point is that there's just a button on the side of the ebook when you're reading it. You can press the button, go to the Leibniz, and you'll see exactly the same diagrammatic representation of the problem. So this is the one that Antonio talked about yesterday of altruistic and self-regarding preferences, and you can see the mathematical representation. We don't actually go through all the Leibnizes when we teach, but yeah, he goes through them. But even if you don't go through them, the students will. Some of them will press the button themselves, and for particular students, even if you're not teaching the maths at the same time, they'll find that very useful. So that it kind of gets them to see from very early on that you can show mathematically the models that they're learning. So instead of separating the maths and it being attached to very abstract problems and often quite trivial problems, here it's being connected with the problems that they're solving in their economics. And I think that's far more motivating for them in terms of improving their math skills. Okay, this is the Doing Economics, the 12 projects. I'll leave it for you to explore these. Just to highlight a couple of things. So Project 9, for example, uses the Ethiopian social survey data. Students get experience at cleaning data. So that there's quite a lot of skills that are being developed here that are often not really learned or encountered at all by students until they're in a PhD program. So it's something that can be done very early, and for many students, they're now coming in knowing that these are the skills they need in the labour market, whatever kind of job they're going to do. And often they're coming in now with quite good coding skills. So this is just the way the spreadsheet version is set out with every step. There are also video walkthroughs, and this is the management practices project. They have to do things, explain how the survey data is collected, then they're given tasks, calculating conditional means, constructing confidence intervals, and so on. So this is just an example of the R version. So let's go back to the economy. I want to talk briefly about the logic, the structure of the course. So what we've got here is the standard principles text, the way it's normally organized, and here is the economy next to it, so that you can see the comparison. So as I set out yesterday, we start with the big questions about the economy rather than economics. So we're starting with this real phenomenon in the world. Then we go to economic decision making. Units 2 and 3 is an individual making a decision against nature. Then economic relationships and interactions are brought in, so that's the logic. Along with economic institutions, which Antonio talked about yesterday, and then applying that structure to the firm, which is Unit 6. Units 7 to 10 bring in markets, market dynamics, and markets working and not working. And then from Unit 13 to 15, it's the aggregate economy in the short and medium run, and then the aggregate economy in the long run, and then the capstone units. So that's the logic, the way that this has been put together. You can read all of this in the note to instructors, which is at the front of the ebook. There's a similar one at the front of ESPP, so there's actually a lot of information in there, and this is just to give you a hint where to look. What we do is we, as I hinted yesterday, we demote supply and demand diagrams. So this is just to give you some historical sense of the use of analytical figures in principles textbooks over time. So Samuelson had many more diagrams than the immediately preceding book by Eli, and then we have even more. You can see down here, but we have a much, much smaller proportion of those are supply and demand. So that's consistent with the logic I suggested yesterday. In most modern textbooks, those supply and demand figures are used for all kinds of markets. They're used for oligopolistic markets, for labour markets, whether local and aggregate, and the same kind of imagery and vernacular is used for aggregate supply and aggregate demand for the macroeconomy. The reason that we don't do this, there are lots of reasons, but one particular reason is that using this image all the time for all these different kinds of markets suggests that markets clear, that's like the standard case students should be thinking about, and we want them to think very differently from that, and that they also are led to think that whatever market they're thinking about, where this supply and demand model is being used, carries with it the normative properties of markets that do clear. So we made the clearing market the very special case, and the general case is of markets that don't clear. We, of course, emphasize the forces of supply and demand, so it's not that supply and demand has somehow vanished from the stage, but we don't use the diagram in the same intensive way it's used in most principles textbooks. The labour and credit market never clear. There's no industry supply curve in price setting markets, so we just want to get away from the notion that economics is about supply and demand diagrams. You can ask your students to, in the first class you have with them, if you've done the word cloud, another thing you can do with them is to use their bodies to explain some concept in economics. And some of them do things like this. Right, what's that? Some kind of feasible frontier. Some of them do things like this, and most of them do something like this. So you then tell them that they're not going to see anything like this until the 8th week of the semester. We do not use the aggregate supply and demand model for the macroeconomy at all. And I think most of you are probably aware of good reasons why not. We have 6 capstone units at the end of the text, and one way, if you actually ever get around to seeing the physical book, you'll see that the pages are coloured in these colours here. So the themes that are threaded through the whole of the course, the whole of the ebook, are history, instability and growth. That's capstone number 17, which is 100 years of economic history from the Great Depression to the financial crisis. The global economy, unit 18, inequality, unit 19, environment, unit 20, innovation and networked economy, 21, politics and policy, 22. And then throughout the whole book, you get these coloured buttons, and they indicate where those themes are threaded through. So we're kind of delivering on the promise to be bringing into the first course these really important themes that address the big questions. So you can see pretty quickly when you look at a unit which of the themes are going to be covered. Yeah.
Are there plans to add other capstone units? Are there some demands from students or other instructors that call for other themes?
Yeah, so do you have a theme in mind?
Agriculture.
Agriculture, interesting. So the theme, does anyone else have a theme in mind? We can, yeah.
Biodiversity.
Yeah, that can be, could be, although it's not really at the moment, part of Unit 20. So agriculture.
No, it's going to be very different.
Yeah. Okay, okay. So we can put that on the list. Biodiversity, agriculture. There's another big one I thought someone would come up with.
Mining.
Yeah. Okay, but we could list every industry. We're not going to have a capstone for every industry.
Legislation, but it's only big.
Yeah. Okay. So another one I think that could be a capstone is cities. Right. So there's no spatial dimension here. I think cities is there's incredibly interesting, again, combination of modelling and real world questions that are raised with cities. We are developing a new thing called Core Insights, which will be less extensive than capstones, and that would be a way, I think, of allowing for author-signed core material to be added to the collection. Yeah.
There's also the gender and racial chapters.
Yes, that are coming. Yeah. So the Core USA, which is based at Barnard in Columbia, they're developing core insights on gender and race, as well as on US. They're going to have one called American Capitalism and the American Dream. I think there'll be another one on economics of slavery. So yeah, there's plenty coming. This is options for course structure. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. Again, this is in the that notes to instructors about how to construct a one-year course, just a one-semester course on micro, a one-semester course introduction to macro, and then the most challenging in some ways is if you've just got one semester to teach economics for a principles course. So it is possible, and it's been done. In each case, we've suggested universities where these combinations are already being used successfully. And this is the kind of thing where you need to have a look at what we've suggested, think about how well it fits for your university, and then we can often hook you up with people in other places that have taught similar courses. There's one other resource on the website that you might want to access for these kinds of questions, and that's called Core Labs. And you can join Core Labs, and Core Labs is a community, so it's a community platform where people ask questions. You can upload files of your syllabus, for example, or exam questions. You can upload PowerPoints, you can download other people's PowerPoints, comment on other people's slides, and so on. So that's a kind of community resource that's gradually building up. There are also options for pedagogy. This is being taught with traditional teaching in some classrooms. It's being taught with a lot of classroom games and experiments, as Antonio indicated yesterday, and it's also being taught with a flipped classroom, and I think probably most successfully with some combination of all three. Okay, so some combination of lectures, games and experiments, and flipping. So one dimension of flipping is creating incentives through your sort of assessment mechanisms for students to read the units before class. And we've fairly successfully implemented this to the extent that we get complaints when we do the surveys halfway through the term. And the most common complaint, Antonio, is,
"You've already seen this, why are you explaining this again?"
yes, they complain, "Why are you telling us in the lecture what we've already read?" So this is the kind of complaint you want to get from your students. On the other hand, it kind of puts you on, puts you on the spot that in the lectures you should be doing something different. Or at least you should be using material from the end of the unit. There's tons of material in these units, but what the students really don't want to see is the stuff up front, which they have already been through.
Here I'm going to be talking about teaching theory, meaning more or less micro theory, the way I do it using the core. Here I say opinions are only mine or not, in the sense that half of it is really Margaret Stevens, who prepared the slides, and she would do a much better job, but you get the second best, or I don't know, fourth best or something. Okay, so let me begin with a bit of motivation, and it's interesting because this is part of why I started using the core. So this is a Twitter thread from Ben Golub, who's a brilliant young theorist from Harvard, and he was saying many activists are disappointed with the way our economy works, and they blame a generic backbear neoclassical economics. In contrast, left-leaning economists tend to think modern microeconomics is the most powerful tool humans have for criticizing market outcomes and suggesting improvements to institutions. So there's at least two reasons for the tension. The first is laziness, tribalism. It's easier for your average Twitter rage walla to these neoliberals and mention Mars than to think literally about specific market failures and hard trade-offs. But the important is the second one. The second reason is economists' fault. Our intro and intermediate teaching typically undersells the capacity of economic theory to articulate forceful arguments against the prevailing order, even though this capacity is, for many practitioners, the whole point. That's why we do economics, most of us. And then Olivier Gosner answered, well said, in my course with Michaud, students dislike the pattern supply, demand and equilibrium, which they perceived as too pro-market, but they enjoyed market power and got really excited with game theory as they saw the potential for economic design in it. And the answer, you guys have to check out core. Games and institutions come before markets. That's what precisely I'm going to talk about today. The labor market is frictional from the get-go. People are altruistic. My students learn King Solomon's Dilemma, which is one of the most interesting kind of and fun ways to teach mechanism design or implementation before competitive markets. And the point that I'm trying to make is that we design the economy with the rules of the game that we're playing, and that's precisely what we're trying to do. So markets is just one way in which the economies work, but there are others, and we're trying to make people aware of that. Okay, so I mean, this is a bit of a sales pitch, but don't just take my word. So this is taken from an email that, as head of department, I got from a student last year, and then I think the thing in bold is what I wanted you to take. So I wanted to understand the world, understand the forces. Coming in the first year, the core econ program blew my mind. I don't think anywhere else does a first-year student of economics learn about Nordhaus climate change models or the reason why immigration doesn't reduce natives' wages. I felt so grateful for all this knowledge, which is a powerful tool. So grateful to have the chance to learn all of this. Okay, so enough of sales pitches, and since I do lots of experiments in the class and elsewhere, I wanted to start with an experiment, which I think it's useful to try to see the methodology at work. Perhaps many of you already know this, but let me go through this. So this is an experiment in which people are told that there is a company A that is worth between 0 and 100 million under the management of A, and all values are equally likely. You can even think just integer values if you want. Now, that same company, if you turn over the management to B, is worth 50% more. And I have here some drawing with the Gulf of Mexico, and because the idea is this might be a company that is, it's doing the oil exploration, and it owns some tracts in oil, and that company is perhaps not that's the reason why it's worth more under B. It's perhaps not very efficient, but it owns the oil fields. And whatever oil there is, if the company is now managed by B, then it would be worth more. But the trick here is that company A knows its actual value, but company B only knows the distribution. So if I'm worth 50, I know that I'm worth 50, and I'm A, and if I was owned by B, I will be worth 75, but B doesn't know whether I'm 50 or 0 or 100, only knows the distribution. Another question is, and the way to dramatize this to students is you're a young employee from a consulting company. Many of our students want to go into consultancies, and your first job is to do this. You're hired by B to recommend them what to bid, and you're the consultant. And if you get it right, if you get the right answer, then you're going to be promoted into a senior level, or you might even be made a partner of the company. And if you don't get it right, you're fired. And that's the incentive scheme that you're going to have in here. And actually, at least for UCL students, it completely focuses their minds, because they want to succeed and they want to be consultants, many of them. And that's a question. And then we're going to do this. So one, as a consultant for B, what would you recommend? And rather than trying to ask each one of you, let me do this by ranges, because that's the data I'm going to show you later. That's how it does it. So let's say, who among you would offer 80 or more? Okay, so let's say something between 80 and 70. No, 70 and 60. All right, couple of people. Something between 60 and 50. Couple more. 50 and 40. 40 and 30. 30 and 10. 10 and 0. 0. All right. So, yeah. I knew you would do that. Okay, so it's actually 0. But let me first tell you that although many of you were too shy to give an answer, those who gave an answer were not all that unusual. So this is an experiment that was done first run by Samuelson Baserman in '85. And in all those experiments, it was done for some students without incentives and others with monetary incentives. The distribution don't differ all that much, although they do differ a little bit. Few people do 80, a few between 70 and 80, and so on and so forth. And you have a full distribution here. And in the classes, when I normally do it, you get something that actually is pretty close to this. So the students kind of, even though my students don't have incentives, they tend to behave as if they had incentives in the classroom. So we try, as much as I can, I try to start with some kind of data that they can, focuses their minds. And then in many cases like this one, you can go to theory for an answer. And this is some problems don't have an answer. This one has an answer. And the answer is the following. So first of all, 80% of the classes, 90% of the classes are fired. And that's useful for them to see, so I have to think about this. And then you shouldn't do what most of you did. Now, the way to reason about this is take any bit, call it X, and now the key step of the argument that many people miss is only the firms that are valued before X will sell. And therefore, if you make an offer of X, the expected value under A management of those firms is X over 2. Of course, under your management is more valuable, so under your management is worth 50% more, so because you're worth 50% more, you end up getting as expected revenues from whatever offer you made, 0.75 of the offer you made. But remember, you are paying X. Now, if you pay X, your net value is 0.25X minus 0.525X, so the best bid in this case is 0, and therefore you're fired unless you did like Wendy or Carlos and offered 0. Okay, so that's the kind of methodology one uses. One first puts them in front of some data, and then let's try to reason through the way that you went to here. And the thing is, the core takes evidence very seriously, but we also think that evidence without theory is usually not very useful. And students learn more when you do things hands-on. And we also show them that behavioral biases like this one, so this one is the one that is a similar one that is behind why there is a winner's curse, is the lack of understanding that when you're making an offer, other people are going to react to the offer. So that's the notion that's behind, let's say, the cursed equilibrium that has been proposed to try to understand behavior in auctions. And also, kind of importantly, is that games and information are crucial to how we teach and learn economics, and in the core project they are kind of the cornerstone of the way that we do the teaching. I'm going to repeat a bit, and actually in a slightly different way, something that Wendy has already said, but I'll do it in a kind of shorter, because she's already told it. So in the units 1 to 10, which are kind of, although now we've changed the order of the unit, but anyway, so the first 10 units, the way we do them is, first of all, there's a couple of units in which there is a big question and a baby answer. In our case, it's technology and institutions, but the fact that technology, which is the answer that we give in 2 to the question of the hockey sticks that we have in 1, is only a baby answer, so it's true. So technology and institutions probably allow us to do the jump and to grow this fast, but why do these institutions and not others? Why in some places and not in others? And this is just a way to tell people you need to make the effort that we're going to ask you in the next few units. So units 3, 4, and 5 is the method that we're going to use to try to answer the question all the time. And unit 3 is decision theory. So the reason why these things happen is because humans make decisions. So we put people in front of decisions, first of all, with a kind of exogenous and fixed constraints, so that's unit 3. Unit 4 is the limits to choice. The constraints are not any longer some kind of fixed exogenous constraints, but are the decisions of other people, and therefore we need to understand games. And finally, in Unit 5, which is really crucial, cornerstone for the book, is actually different rules of the game lead to different outcomes. And anyone that has been in this conference for 3 days realizes that that's just the bread and butter of economics. What we're doing all the time is saying, if we do this rather than that, then this is going to happen or that is going to happen. And that's really crucial, and that's, we we change the institutions, we change the rules, and things, behavior is going to be different, and we need to understand what's the best way to organize the economy. And that's crucial because then we're not privileging, as we were saying, the market over some other mechanism. The market is one mechanism, there are other mechanisms, and even the market by itself is not a mechanism. So there are many ways to organize markets. In some places you do it one way, in other places you do it another way. There are lots of details that are involved in the market. So this is what's saying little details matter, and we're going to pay them a lot of attention. And then once you've done that, then you say, okay, so now we start applying the methodology, and we say, first we study the labor market, and we study from the beginning, the labor market is a frictional labor market in which there are incentive problems, and that the labor market has to somehow surmount or has to deal with the incentive problems that exist in the market. Then Unit 7 is a unit in which you have to basically think how the firm makes decisions, and I'm going to spend quite a bit of time basically going through Unit 7 in a way, or actually using Margaret's ideas on how we go through Unit 7. And then it's only in Unit 8 that we say, okay, and there's a specific way in which the firm interacts in a market, which is when the firm is not a price maker but a price taker. So you go from here. This is a special case of a more general case. It's just a special case. It's an interesting special case, but it's a special case. And then we go back to the labor market and use and put together the incentive problems with how the firm conducts itself, and then feed back into a complete labor market that is a labor market that has equilibrium unemployment from the beginning, which also makes it very easy to connect to the macro part, and then Wendy is going to talk about. And then you can talk about external effects, market failures, and so on. So that's sort of the strategy in here. Now this same kind of general structure is also get repeated within units. So Unit 4, for example, we tell them as a motivation, we want to explain social dilemma. The social dilemma is there's something really very funny going on in the world, there's a big deviation in average temperature, it's most likely caused by fossil fuels. Why is humanity self-destructing itself? And that's what we want to understand, and that's what the unit is designed to do. Okay, and then once you first explain the motivation, then you start going through the tools and start with very simple tools. We give them a prisoner's dilemma as an example of a social dilemma, and then show them, well, I mean, this is one way to understand the problem, the fact that there's a social dilemma, and that's why we have all these emissions. But then we go back and say, but wait a second. If the game was slightly different, things can change. And then we put them, this is something that I told the other day, we put them in the example of an experiment. So if you do an experiment in which there's voluntary contributions to public goods, then you have something that looks like this in all over the world. If you have voluntary contributions to public goods, contributions end up going down. That looks like a situation in which we are going through a social dilemma. But then if you change slightly the rules and add the possibility for a social punishment that is also altruistic, but it's still a social punishment, then suddenly you can recover cooperation very easily. Okay, and once you've explained the motivation, explained the tools in much more detail, so there's a lot more analysis of Nash equilibrium, and even we do dynamic games. But then once you've done all of this, then the fact that they have all these tools under the belt means that, and they have done the work before coming to class, then you can invent new things. There's no reason why you should use these same things in class as they are in the textbook. You can use your own games and do your own modifications, because they already know this, so it's better to do something new. So for example, in Unit 5, something that I show them is I tell them about the King Solomon's Dilemma game. And this is a very interesting game because it looks like a funny stuff, but then you can at the end, once they've done the funny stuff, you can tell them, and by the way, this looks like something that might be interesting to you in real life. So what does the King Solomon's Dilemma do? Okay, so this is a game in which comes from the Bible, and in the Bible there's the king. They're supposed to be very wise, and the dilemma that is confronted with him, and this is a parable that is done to show how wise rulers behave themselves. And it actually gives you an idea that wise rulers can maybe not be very ethical, and if you take the book at its word. So in King Solomon's Dilemma is the probably first documented case of a sudden death syndrome that you can see anywhere. So it's two women sleeping together, each with its own baby, and one of the two babies dies. And the issue is that there's a society in which women are oppressed, and having a child actually lifts them up a little bit, and they want to be the one that actually has the boy that didn't die. So the dilemma is that both of the women, let's call them Ruth and Esther, although the book doesn't give names, they go to the king, or they go to probably not the king directly, but they go to someone in the court and say, the boy is mine. The boy that survived from this awful incident is mine. And then we know, because we are kind of take the point of view of the omniscient narrator, that Ruth is the true mother, and of course Esther is not, but someone doesn't know. And that's the design problem that one has to solve. It's a ruler that wants to allocate an object to an individual, and wants to allocate the object to the individual that values it the most. And let's say, and you have to emphasize this in class to avoid lawsuits, that the only reason we're putting values on life is because we're evil economists, and evil economists are allowed to put values on life. So Ruth values baby Daniel in 100, and Esther values Daniel in 10. And then we take them through successive rules of the game to solve this problem, and show them what is the allocation implications of the different rules of the game. So rule 1 is the high priest flips a coin and then heads to Ruth and tells to Esther. And by the way, by the end, I will tell you how this relates to something that is a bit more, like I said, than a funny story. Now, so of course, at this point, you have to tell the students what's wrong with this rule. And then, of course, at least in a classroom of 340 students as I have at UCL, there's always one individual that says, well, of course, this is a stupid rule because you just said that you wanted to allocate the baby to the true mother, and this rule only allocates the baby to the true mother 50% of the time, so that doesn't seem like a very nice rule. Okay, so easy to dismiss. Now, second rule, which is the rule that is actually proposed in the book, at least that's the one that is proposed formally, or the rule that the king says he's going to abide by, is, okay, there's the mothers. If you both insist that you are the mother, then the general here is going to split the boy in two, and each one of you is going to get half of the boy, which is, he says, a very just rule. If only one of you insists, then of course I give the baby Daniel to the mother that actually insists, and not to the other. And although it doesn't say in the book what happens, because we are game theorists, and students have to be recalled that they are game theorists at this point. With Unit 5, they already know game theory. If none of you insist, then what happens? And then let's say we give the boy to a third mother, called Judith. And then in this game, it actually has an easy representation, and this is Ruth and Esther are the mothers, and the systems are the two strategies, and then you show them this game and you tell them what's the equilibrium of this game. And that's an interesting, already an interesting exercise. They've seen games, and in fact this is, as you will notice immediately, it has two equilibria, this game, and it's a very sensible game for them to analyze. You have these negative outcomes in here, and then it's a game with multiple equilibria, and then you can use this to tell them, okay, so let's, does this sound like a reasonable game, and what's wrong with this game, and then they come up with all sorts of reasons why this is a very stupid game, because there's two equilibria, and how are they going to coordinate on the equilibria, and what's going to happen, and so on. So this gives us a very, very nice conversation We don't teach them formally mixed strategy equilibria, but if you have a class with 340 students, then occasionally one of them says, oh, but there's this other thing that is called a mixed strategy equilibrium, and then you can use this to explain class. Because, there's always a nerd in 340 people. And so that's kind of nice. It's also nice because it allows us to do something else. The history in the book says that what happened is that the true mother desisted and the not true mother insisted, and therefore, in principle, according to the rules of the game that the ruler, the king, had established, this should have happened. And that would be a kind of disaster also, because you're not allocating, you're 100%, you're not allocating to the true mother, which is what you said you wanted to do. And then that's also a nice point for a discussion, because then you can tell students, so what's wrong in here? And then you can start thinking, oh, what happens when rulers say that they're going to establish a rule and then they don't follow the rules, and that's something that then when they go to macro, they're going to see, okay, so what is this problem of time inconsistency and so on. So they already in Unit 5, they're thinking about time inconsistency and why sometimes the rulers might need to tie their hands because otherwise they're going to lie like this kind of liar king, and then so it is also interesting to say, so was that such a wise king? If he's a king that is lying, maybe he's wise, but he's also a liar. And in any case, if you try this, you can get away with it once, because the second time you're not going to be able to, because people are going to anticipate that you lie. And moreover, if I was a person that is going to be ruled by this king, what am I going to think? This is a ruler that is someone that does not respect his own rules. So that's also useful from the point of view of talking about institutions, and certainly for Spain, but I'm sure that in Latin America, this issue of time inconsistency and rulers that say one thing and do the other is probably also important. So I think that's a teachable moment as well. And once you've done this, you can go through, okay, so let's try rules that are a bit more sensible, and then you can give them King Solomon 3, which is the high priest auctions the boy, and then whoever pays more gets the baby Daniel, and then you can discuss a little bit auctions. Although we haven't studied auctions formally before, you can try to make them understand. In fact, if you have enough time, that's a very nice point to talk about, second price auctions, and why second price auctions are very nice to explain, because we do talk about in Unit 4 about dominant strategies, and then this is a very nice example of game with dominant strategies, and so it's kind of nice. It does the job, because if you auction the boy, then you allocate the boy to the true mother, but you can say, okay, now suppose that's a nice mechanism, because it allocates to the person you want and in fact generates some revenue. But suppose as the king you don't want the high priest to have any more money, and you want to do it in a way in which you allocate the boy to the true mother, but in addition, no one spends any money. And then that's King Solomon 4 rule, which is actually comes from a paper of Glaser and Ma, which is a true beauty, and that's where we take the story from. Okay, so this is the rule. So if only one insists, I give baby Daniel to the only woman that insists. If none of you insist, then I gave the boy to Judith as before. And then what they change is, if both of you insist, each one is going to pay a talent, and the high priest auctions the boy. And that actually does the job very nicely, because then you notice that you can, if both of the mothers insist, then each one is going to pay a talent, and then the high priest auctions the boy. You know what's going to happen then. You know that if you do in the second price auction that we've already discussed here, then the final payoffs, if you disregard the fact of the talent, is that one of them, the true mother, is going to get the boy, who is going to have a net utility of 90, and the other is going to have a utility of 0. If you then deduct the one talent that you pay, then you can go back to this and say, what happens if I put here a minus 89 and here a minus 1? And then if you do that, you realize that suddenly this game is dominant solvable, and in fact that's the only equilibrium of this game. And that's kind of nice. So you've gone through 4 rules of the game, each one gives you a different thing, and one of them has a nice thing. Now, on top of that, it turns out that there is a story that you can tell after that that is not a biblical story. You can say, imagine what you want to do is to allocate a spectrum license for telecommunications. And that the objective is to give the spectrum license to the firm that values it the most, and you want to do it potentially, so that no firm actually. And now rule 1 is what firms used to do, governments used to do until relatively recently. I don't think there was ever a rule like this done in human history. But then certainly the next step from rule 1 is rule 3, so many governments now do this, and this is kind of a novel thing that could be done if a government wanted to allocate the spectrum without making the firms spend money. Okay, so that's kind of the story. So how are we doing with time? Okay, so let me spend the last 10 minutes of this talking about how we teach the way differently, in a bit more detail, how we teach differently the way firms make decisions about pricing and so on, and that's Unit 7. So the way normally supply and demand is taught, or is there's a competitive market from the beginning in which there are many buyers, many sellers, and so on and so forth. And then from the get-go, there's perfect competition. There's a market supply and demand curves, and then you look at equilibrium price and quantity and so on. Now that's, in some senses, it's easy to teach, but in other senses, it's very difficult to teach. It's easy to teach in the sense that there's lots of material, and that's the way we've been trained. But it's difficult to teach because from the beginning, you're using a model that is quite unrealistic, and you have to tell people, well, what are the markets in which there is perfect competition? So you need the existence of homogeneous goods, and many firms are selling homogeneous goods, and it's, when you try to tell the students examples, you always come up with the same silly examples about the market for wheat and the market for... But even then, there's always a student that tells, well, but I know that there's this special kind of wheat that is sold by this specialist firm and is more or less cornered that market for that specialist wheat. So it's kind of, it's easy in some ways, but it's complicated in other ways. So our approach is very different. So in our approach, so we start with a firm that sets the price in the market for its own product, as a market above marginal cost, so there will be some deadweight loss, but there is a market power. So from the beginning, firms have market power, and competition curtails this market power. So the more competition there is, the more elasticity, the more difficult it is for you to sell. But you can treat all the types of markets with a unified structure. There are markets with more competition, there are markets with less competition, but in all of them, the firm do basically the same thing. They do the same problem of optimization. So price setting, in our case, price setting with differentiated proxies is our benchmark model, as it is in modern I/O, and I would say also in modern macro. So if I've gone to macro seminars in here, that's what they do nowadays. We don't do a more formal treatment of oligopoly, so that would be an intermediate, but at least from the beginning there is monopolistic competition, which actually is then the basis for the macro model. So it lays over very nicely with the second part of the course. And perfect competition, it is a limiting case. So we do teach perfect competition in Unit 8, but it's just like one special case. It's not a privileged case in any way, it's just one of the cases that could happen in your market. So when we go to perfect competition, so competition can constrain sometimes to be firms to be price takers, and then you can do comparative statics and all the usual things. But real world markets are not usually perfectly competitive. That's why we don't start there and then still say, okay, that's like a limiting case. I understand, but I take as given the initial case as the usual one. Now, So the way we do this, that another difference is that, so one difference is we don't privilege perfect competition. The other difference is in the methodology of teaching. We try to use the same approach for teaching how firms make decisions as the way that in fact, even literally, this more or less the same graphs that we use to teach them how individuals make decisions, so that they don't have to relearn the tools to do something that in fact is really the same. So, so it's just another constraint optimization problem, like the one that they see in Unit 3, and there's just an objective function, just like it was maximizing utility for consumers. It's maximizing profit for the firms, and we draw isoprofit curves in the price quantity space. So just like we were drawing good 1 and good 2 for consumers, there's price and quantity for the firms, and your objective function is profit. And the constraint that the firm is facing, just like the consumer, which I think we start with a decision between leisure and consumption for the consumer. Here it's a decision between price and quantity, and there's a trade-off, and the trade-off it's done through the demand curve, and optimum happens at a tangency point which captures a trade-off between price and quantity. Now, something interesting here, though I usually in lectures I anticipate this in Unit 3, is that now there is even less of a reason for the feasible set to be a concave set. So you can have feasible sets that are convex, and then you can have you can tell them about corner solutions and that kind of thing. So that's that kind of useful for students. And at the maximum, you end up showing that the optimum, so the tangency condition ends up being the slope of the isoprofit equals to the slope of demand, but you rearrange the terms and you say that the markups equal the inverse of elasticity. And that's very useful because you can say, see, if you have many competitors, then elasticity would be very high, and therefore your markups will be very low. If you have few competitors, then elasticity will be relatively low, and then your markups will be high. So you can span all the kind of modes of competition in one easy graph already in the first unit. And then, yeah, there's perfect competition in Unit 8, but from the beginning, you can talk about competition in markets and various degrees of competition in markets. And then, as I say, then it's easy to see, then if you go to perfect competition when elasticity is infinite, then just a limiting case in which, and then easily price equals marginal cost. So there's very easy transition from perfect to imperfect competition in this way of teaching. And it's actually not more difficult to teach than the usual way we teach. So, we contrast this and very smartly what Margaret has done is show so this is like when in advertising when you show your product and the competition's product. So our product is kind of nice, well drawn, lots of colors, and the competition is gray and black and white and so on. But anyway, so and then for price taking it's the same thing. So the graphs are are complicated in both cases, so it's not more complicated at all, but it allows for this integration of competition, perfect and imperfect competition. So just to conclude, so the core project allows you to teach theory in a different way, and I would say in a more modern way, and it's the fact that we just do theory this way, and what I always find very interesting, and that's a market failure one has to reflect upon, is the fact that this was not done 20 years earlier is a mystery to me, and okay, thanks for your patience.